I have been fairly level-headed this entire season. I have been the middle way, the clear path, the take a deep breath after a loss. Not this time. Not on this Friday episode of Locked On Grizzlies. It's not okay. That was a bad loss, and against a good team. The Grizzlies should have won that game, but instead we're talking about a loss. I'm mad. Let's be mad together on this episode of Locked On Grizzlies. Let's do it.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to this episode of Locked On Grizzlies. I am an angry and upset Joe Mullinax, not just because I'm flying solo and DeMichael Cole is once again missing, understandably so. I would never be mad at DeMichael. I'm mad about Grizzlies Sixers, and we're going to talk more about that here in a moment. But first, this episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by BetterHelp. It's not a crisis line. It's not self-help. It's professional therapy done securely online, available to people worldwide. And they have a special offer for my listeners, our listeners. Get 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/lockedon. We are proud members here on Locked On Grizzlies of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Check us out on YouTube as well. Like, comment, rate, review, subscribe. Hit us up and make us a part of your Grizzlies experience. I'm upset. And I took a few minutes. I'm going to be honest with you, dear listener, dear viewer. I took a moment because this was supposed to be a celebratory show. This is supposed to be ding, ding, ding. The Memphis Grizzlies are back, baby. Check them out. Look at Jaren Jackson Jr. doing defensive stuff. Look at Xavier Tillman looking like a functional, rotational basketball player in the National Basketball Association. Shout out to him. Shout out to John Conchar. How about John Conchar doing stuff, making shots? None of them were threes, but he made all three of his attempts. Look at Desmond Bane. Still not getting to 30 points a game. Still not quite himself in terms of his three-point shot, but shooting 50% from the floor with 8 rebounds, 2 assists. Not Bane's fault. And yet another, once again, collapse for the Memphis Grizzlies. The Grizzlies were up by 15 at the end of the first quarter. 15 points. And it was much more Memphis being ready and Philly not than it was Memphis being better than Philly. Because bit by bit, 3 points in the second quarter, 6 points in the third quarter, 11 points in the fourth quarter. The Sixers chipped and chipped and chipped away like a good veteran team, and the Grizzlies very much looked their age, especially late, in a game they should have won, and I'm angry. Here's the number reason why I'm so angry, and it's okay to be angry. Stop telling us how I feel, Joe. It's not fair. I'm telling you how to feel. I'm angry tonight. I'm angry today. I'm angry wherever you are, however you may be checking out Locked On Grizzlies. I'm upset, and here's the number one reason. Xavier Tillman Sr., not mad at him at all. He played his tail off and had one of his very best basketball games, one of his best performances of the season when his team needed him to in Philly. Kudos to X. He did well finding open spot on Ja Morant drives. We'll talk about Ja later on in the show. He did a good job locating the space that is vacated on those dribble penetration moves, making himself available to the ball, taking advantage. Good job to X on that. 12 rebounds. I think the rebounding thing is overrated. I believe in team rebounding. And sure, X grabbed 12 rebounds, but Jaren had 9. Bane had 8. Dylan Brooks had 5, which is rare for him in terms of rebounding. He's a pretty poor rebounding wing. So there's a team effort behind this rebounding. John Conchar with 5 as well. So I am not mad at Xavier Tillman for playing well. I'm mad at Xavier Tillman for playing 32 minutes. Because he never should have been asked to play 32 minutes. He has played 151 games as a member of the Memphis Grizzlies. 151 regular season games. Doesn't count the playoffs. So it's more than that. But I looked at those games as well, And across that spectrum, he has played in 30-plus minutes now 6 times. 6 times Xavier Tillman has played more than 30 minutes in an NBA game, the 6th one being the most recent defeat for Memphis at the hands of Philly on Thursday night. He is not a player that is capable of playing that amount of minutes. Meanwhile, while he had a slow start, I'm admitting this. I'm not saying that Brandon Clarke was looking like an all-world player to start the game. He was having foul trouble, which Coach Jenkins loves to overreact to. He was having some foul trouble, some issues. Brandon Clarke wasn't perfect. But you know what Brandon Clarke is? He's one of your 5 or 6 best guys. You know what Xavier Tillman isn't? One of your 5 or 6 best guys. You know what Xavier Tillman doesn't have? A new 4-year, $52 million contract extension. You know what Brandon Clarke has? That contract extension. So at what point do you let your best players play? The best lineup that the Grizzlies have without Steven Adams in terms of switchability, in terms of offensive potential, in terms of pick and roll viability, finishing at the rim, is Ja Morant, Desmond Bane, Dylan Brooks, Jaren Jackson Jr., Brandon Clarke. We rarely see it. We rarely see it. Oh, but Joe, you can't let Jaren play the 5. Jaren can't play the 5. He's going to foul out. If you have a player that is an all-star caliber player, if you have a player that is physically capable of dominating games on the defensive end the way that Jaren Jackson Jr. can dominate games, if you have a guy that is a defensive player of the year that is hindered because he can't play the 5, you have larger problems as an organization. You have larger problems as a roster. At some point, the kid gloves have got to come off. They have to. They have to come off. Jaren Jackson Jr. was chosen by the coaches as an all-star reserve when the vast majority of the media, of the players, of the fans did not see Jaren that way. The coaches saw him that way. And yet he can only play one position on the basketball court? Miss me with that. Miss me with it. I don't believe it. I refuse to believe it. And it sounds like I'm mad at X. I'm not. I'm mad at Taylor Jenkins for putting Xavier Tillman in that position. For putting him out there clearly winded, clearly not able to do what he had done earlier in the game. And it allows for quick passing. It allows for slow rotations. It allows for the weakness of the Grizzlies defense to be taken advantage of. Credit to the 76ers. They made shots. That James Harden step back 3 in the corner, that was a ridiculous shot. Ridiculous. Former MVP making a hell of a shot, hell of a play. But Tobias Harris made some big shots that shouldn't have been made. Xavier Tillman was slow on rotations. That's not X's fault. And he wasn't the only guy that was slow on rotations. But Brandon Clarke was fresh. Brandon Clarke had 4 fouls. X finished with 5. Brandon Clarke is a better offensive player in terms of finishing at the rim, cutting, being aggressive. You have to worry about the athleticism of Brandon Clarke. You have to worry about the verticality of Brandon Clarke, the way that he moves, the maneuverability, both offensively and defensively. You do not have to have that concern about Xavier Tillman because he cannot physically do those things. He can't do them. He has better lateral quickness than he looks like he should. Credit to him. Lower center of gravity. He is getting, like I said on a recent episode of Locked On Grizzlies, he's getting juice out of the squeeze. Brandon Clarke has more juice to offer. And the Grizzlies did not bring the juice against the Philadelphia 76ers because their coach made the choice to not play his best players together. And it's happened throughout the season. I have been calm, mild-mannered. I am very much the guy that says straight and narrow. Not too high, not too low. The end of that game stuck with me because they are asking too much of Xavier Tillman, who has a $1.9 million team option on his contract that they can choose to pick up or not this coming off season. And they do not ask enough of their all-star big who makes $100 million over the life of his contract and the guy that just signed a 4-year, $52 million contract extension. They ask too much of X and not enough out of Clarke and Jaren. So at some point, it's the players or the coach. You want to say Clarke didn't look well against Philly? Okay. You know Xavier Tillman's been out there more than he's accustomed to. Get him out, put Clarke out there, let Clarke fail. Let Jaren fail at the 5. They refuse to let these guys fail. Show me they can't do it. Show me. Stop prognosticating and let these dudes play. They're the best ones you got. That's the first thing I'm mad about on this episode of Locked On Grizzlies. We're going to talk about the next one here in a moment. But first, I want to give a shout out to BetterHelp. This episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by BetterHelp. BetterHelp really does a fantastic job finding a way to help you feel like your best self, right? And we all are looking for ways to get to that point. When you're at your best, you can do great things, but sometimes life can bog you down. You can feel like you're not showing up the way that you want to. Working with a therapist can help you get to that best version of yourself. If you're thinking of giving therapy a try, BetterHelp is a great option. It's convenient, flexible, affordable, and entirely online. You fill out a brief questionnaire, get matched with a licensed therapist, and you switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. If you want to live a more empowered life, therapy can get you there. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOn today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOn. Check them out today. I'm still angry. I don't feel better after that. I don't know about you, but I'm going to continue to vent on this episode of Locked On Grizzlies. Stay with me. Vent with me. Stick around. Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. I'm your host, Joe Mullinax. I'm feeling a little bit better. Still upset that DeMichael's not with me. Again, understandably so. I just miss him when he's not around. He probably would have talked me off the ledge a little bit with that first segment, but you benefited because you got to hear me, rant and rave and be angry in that first segment. And I'm going to continue that energy here in the second segment. I was mad at Taylor Jenkins in the first segment. I want to reiterate that. I'm not mad at Xavier Tillman. He played well. It's not X's fault that he was asked to do too much. We're not asking enough, or the coaching staff is not asking enough of Jaren Jackson Jr. and Brandon Clark. I'm tired of hearing Jaren can't play the 5. I'm tired of it. Show me. Do it. Go foul out. Go learn. Because Jaren has to play the 5. Steven Adams cannot be the savior of this franchise moving forward. That's not tenable. That's not sustainable. That's a topic for another episode. Ja Morant, who is the superstar, who is the guy that gets in front of the microphone and says he's fine in the West, smiles about it. It's okay to be confident, and I like the confidence of Ja Morant. I've defended that comment, and I do believe the Grizzlies are fine in the West. It sounds like I'm angry that I think the season is lost. I'm not angry that the season is lost. It was just one game. They could go out and play well against Denver and the Lakers over the next couple of games, and we're back to where we were before the Philly game even started. So it's not about thinking that the season is lost. It's about letting one slip away against a good basketball team. The Philadelphia 76ers are for real, guys. They are a championship contender. And the Grizzlies hung tough in Philly in a playoff-like environment with a relatively healthy Philadelphia 76ers team. They didn't have anybody on the injury report going into this one. Memphis didn't have, apparently, the most important player on their roster, Steven Adams. They didn't have Luke Kennard, important rotation piece. So they competed well with the 76ers. The Sixers were favored in this game by 4. The Grizzlies winning would have been an upset. So I'm not saying that this is the end of the line and Memphis should collapse and fold up its tent and go home. But I am saying that you should expect more from your best players. In my opinion, Jaren Jackson Jr. is the second best player on the Memphis Grizzlies. If you want to argue Desmond Bane, you can. But Bane played well. The best player on the Memphis Grizzlies is Ja Morant. And in this game, Ja Morant was not the best player on the floor. He wasn't even close. He wasn't the best player on his team. Ja Morant was 3 for 16 from the field in this game. Did make a single 3-point shot, 3 for 16 overall. He made 90% of his free throws, which is, impressive. That's not necessarily a strength of Ja's. Morant only had 5 assists in the game, 3 rebounds, 2 steals. He had 3 turnovers. 15 points on 16 shots is not good enough. That is a line that if Rudy Gay posted it back in the day, and I'm dating myself a little bit in terms of my Grizzlies fandom, if Rudy Gay had posted that line, people would have destroyed him. And Rudy Gay was never as important to the Memphis Grizzlies as Ja Morant is to the Memphis Grizzlies. Ja, to his credit, will be the first one to come out and say that he needs to be better. And that's true. But in order for the Grizzlies to be taken seriously as a finals contender, as a championship team like the Sixers are, Joel Embiid is a legitimate MVP candidate. James Harden has been MVP before. They have veteran role players. The Sixers have what the Grizzlies simply do not have, and that is veteran role players and veteran superstars. The Grizzlies don't have them. They will eventually, right? It's funny how time works. Eventually, the Grizzlies will be superstars or will have superstars that are veteran players. But that's not Memphis right now. So in those key moments, you need your superstar to make plays. And Ja Morant, aside from a pass to Xavier Tillman here, good dish there, maybe one made bucket there when things were collapsing around the team. Ja wasn't there for Memphis when they needed him in this game. He just wasn't. And if he's not bringing what is needed offensively, he's not really going to be able to defensively. He's prone to gambling, attacking passing lanes. And part of that is deflections and trying to create those steals or stocks. That's part of the Grizzlies scheme. So I don't want it to sound like I'm blaming Ja's defense. That's not what he has been given, the max contract he's been given to be that defender. That's not why he gets that money. He gets that money to be the offensive weapon, the guy at the end of games that is capable of being in a position to win it. The ball is in his hands. Go make a play. James Harden did that. Joel Embiid did that. Hell, you could argue Tobias Harris did that. Ja Morant didn't. And it's okay to say that. You can still be a supporter of Ja Morant and acknowledge the reality that his performance against Philadelphia wasn't good enough. It just wasn't. Desmond Bane, not fully healthy. I think there's still some issues with that toe, but he looked good offensively. 10 of 20, 4 for 12 from 3. Could be a little bit better there. But he had 25 points. Jaren Jackson Jr., not the most efficient offensive game, but he was going against almost every possession Joel Embiid. And Joel Embiid is a very good big man, especially defensively. This was one of the best defensive rim protection games I've seen in a long time. Both Jaren and Embiid were very impressive in that way. 4 blocks for Jaren in this game, 6 blocks for Embiid. It's not often you see Jaren get outplayed in that stat, but Embiid did it. To the credit of the Grizzlies defense, Embiid scored his 27 points because he was 13 of 17 from the charity stripe. Embiid was 7 of 25. So it's not like Embiid had some superstar performance, because he didn't. But what Embiid had was James Harden, Tobias Harris, guys that were able to pick him up. Ja doesn't have that, at least not offensively, consistently, as a veteran presence. And that's one of the reasons that Grizzlies GM, Zach Kleiman, and the front office, they tried to go get a Kevin Durant. It was foolhardy. It was never going to happen, but they tried. That's why they tried to go get a Mikal Bridges, who compared to Morant and Bane and Jaren is a bit of a veteran. OG Anunoby. Ages are similar, but in terms of playoff experience, in terms of guys that would fit in terms of the offense, would you rather kick to one of those names that I just said or Dylan Brooks? It's an obvious answer. So to close the game, I thought Taylor Jenkins drew up a really nice play to try to tie it, got Bane a wide open look from 3. He just missed it. And sometimes that happens. Sometimes you have a open shot and you just miss it. In that moment, is it Desmond Bane's fault that the Memphis Grizzlies lost? No. But there is a larger sample size, whether it's minutes played, like I mentioned earlier in the show, or 3 of 16 from the field. On a smaller scale, Ja put up a similar night to what Embiid did. But Embiid got to the charity stripe more, and Embiid impacted the game defensively and as a rebounder in ways that Ja isn't or can't or isn't willing to. And that'd be understandable because, again, he's so important to the offense. Morant had an off night. And when the superstars for the Sixers, the combined efforts of James Harden and Joel Embiid, are able to be those level of players, you need Ja to be his. And when he's not, you're not going to win more often than not. And that's just the reality of the Grizzlies situation. So I'm not necessarily as mad at Ja. It's not that he didn't try. It's just an acceptance of when it's the end of the game and the ball's in your hand, they need you to make a bucket. And if you can't, sometimes you're going to lose. Sometimes you're going to lose. Sometimes you're going to lose. And that's exactly what happened for the Memphis Grizzlies in this one. This episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by Nissan. Nissan's most electric player of the week is brought to you by the all-new, all-electric 2023 Nissan Ariya. A really impressive game in this one from the gentleman by the name of Desmond Bane. Bane, not great from three, but he was that offensive fire plug that the Grizzlies needed him to be. His play was electric, and it was really impressive to see him get to the basket, be stunningly powerful in terms of how he was aggressive, finding space, getting to the rim, scoring in ways that you wouldn't necessarily expect him to be able to. He was the offensive force that the team needed him to be when Morant and Jaren Jackson Jr.'s shots didn't fall. 8 for 32 from the field between Jaren and Ja. Bane was 10 of 20. That is a strong, strong performance, just like the perfect SUV crossover the Nissan Ariya can deliver. The Nissan Ariya packs pin-to-your-seat power and premium intelligence all in one EV. The people who love to drive the all-new, all-electric 2023 Nissan Ariya. Shop now at nissanusa.com. When I come back, there's another game. That's the good thing about the NBA. There's another game to play. We're going to talk about the showdown with the Nuggets and ways for the Grizzlies to get the ship righted, because I don't know if you know this or not, another really good center is going to be on the docket for the Grizzlies. We'll talk about it next here on Locked On Grizzlies. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. I am your host, Joe Mullinax. Closing out this Friday edition of the show, I feel like my urge to yell has dissipated. I was really mad to start the show, and if you stuck around just because you wanted to hear a crazy person, I feel like I slowly descended or removed my descent into madness as the episode went on. It felt good, right? And part of the reason that we're called fans is fanatic, right? We're fanatical about the team, and I wouldn't have followed the team as long as I have. I wouldn't have done all the things that I've done to cover the team, formerly at Grizzly Bear Blues, now going back to Grizzly Bear Blues. We'll talk more about this next week, but I am joining Bluff City Media, which I'm very excited about. Grizzly Bear Blues is being absorbed by Bluff City Media, and you can subscribe. I'm going to be a Grizzlies columnist over there. So we'll talk more about that next week when I can give it a little more time. But shout out to Mark King, Parker Fleming, all those guys over at Bluff City Media and Grizzly Bear Blues. I'm excited to be part of that team moving forward. Maybe one of the first things I'll write about next week is the choices of Taylor Jenkins to go with, a Clark, or excuse me, to not go with Clark and go with Tillman, that sort of thing. So talk more about that next week. But you want to hear about Grizzlies Nuggets. And again, Nikola Jokic coming to town. The Grizzlies are at home. They're one of the best teams in the league at home. That's the good news. The bad news is Denver is one of the best teams in the league, period. The best team in the Western Conference by a considerable margin if you're going by wins and losses. And Nikola Jokic, going by the numbers, is having yet another MVP season. He might be a 3-time MVP, which will be a remarkable accomplishment if the Joker is able to get that done. But it's not just Jokic, right? Jokic obviously has some pretty good help by his side. And the Nuggets are a really strong basketball team, right? Like Jokic is a tremendous player, and I'm not trying to say that he's not. But it's important to point out that he's not alone in his contributions to what Denver is capable of doing. You have Jamal Murray scoring 20 points a game, looking impressive as he continues to come back from his knee injury. Aaron Gordon, you could argue, if Jaren Jackson Jr. was an all-star, Aaron Gordon might have a legitimate gripe for being an all-star in the Western Conference, having perhaps his best season as a member of the Nuggets for sure, and potentially his best season as a pro. I know Gordon has won some dunk contests, and he put up some large numbers while he's in Orlando, but he's doing this on one of the best teams in the NBA in Denver now. So Gordon deserves some credit. Michael Porter Jr., Kentavious Caldwell-Pope shooting 45% from three. That's a remarkable percentage from beyond the arc. Michael Porter Jr. shooting over 40% from three on 7.2 attempts per game. This is all according to basketballreference.com. So Jokic gets the headlines, as well he should, because he is, again, looking like an MVP. He's averaging a triple-double, almost 25 points, 11 and a half rebounds, and over 10 assists. That's tremendous production. But he's not alone. He has got several guys by his side, including old friend Jeff Green, that are showing that they are still capable of producing at a high level, or in the case of Michael Porter Jr. and Jamal Murray, are getting back to form as the two young pieces alongside Jokic. This is not going to be an easy game for the Memphis Grizzlies, obviously. And assuming Steven Adams is still out, which, Taylor Jenkins alluded to that at practice on Wednesday, that it was likely that Steven would not play again until at the earliest Tuesday against the Lakers. You're back in the same situation you were in against Philadelphia. You started Brandon Clarke alongside Jaren Jackson Jr., and then you went away from it because of foul trouble. You were concerned that Clarke wasn't playing well enough. I already went down the road of why I disagreed with that decision. I think Clarke raises the ceiling of this Grizzlies team. The floor, when Clarke is not playing well, Xavier Tillman's a little more steady. Again, I don't want to sound like a Xavier Tillman hater. I feel like on the previous episodes of Locked On Grizzlies, to Michael Cole, but especially me, have been Xavier Tillman haters. In this particular instance, I'm really not. You can't ask more from X than what he gave against the Sixers. But he shouldn't be asked to give that much. You want to play X 20 or so minutes against Joker and the larger Denver Nuggets? Go for it. But Brandon Clarke should see a majority of that time. You can't just be afraid of the rebounding advantage. You have to lean into your athleticism in the front court. You have to allow for Jaren to get that mismatch. Everybody talks about Joker putting Jaren in foul trouble. How about Jaren tries to put some people in foul trouble? Lean into your all-star caliber player. Let these guys compete and make mistakes. Play your best guys. Sorry, I'm getting angry again. I need to calm down. Woosah, right? They need to let Jaren and Brandon play and let them play through the issues that they might have and let them find their footing, because the advantage that the Grizzlies are going to have, aside from, the point guard position where Ja Morant will likely be able to have his way whenever he wants it, if he's able to finish the scoring. Ja's going to be motivated. He's going to be at home. I'm not worried about Morant. I think he's going to rise to the occasion and get back out of it. The Philly stuff, that's more of a in the moment that your team needs you. You weren't there offensively the way that you're needed. That won't be a constant thing, but it's becoming a larger trend that Brandon Clarke and Jaren Jackson Jr. are not being allowed to be together because of foul concerns, because of worries about Jaren at the 5 and getting into foul trouble, concerns about his size. Jaren and X weigh the same. Jaren's just 3 inches taller. So in terms of muscle, we need weight, we need bulk. Jaren's pretty big. You have to let these guys play together because of their switchability defensively, because of what they are capable of on the offensive end of the floor. Jaren finding mismatches, Brandon Clarke in the pick and roll. There are very few guys in the NBA that are as efficient at the rim as Brandon Clarke. You have to let him have the opportunity to be that productive piece. Let him work through an issue. Not disputing that Xavier Tillman played well against Philly, but he also has only played, as I mentioned earlier in the show, the amount of time that he played against the 76ers 6 times in 150-plus games. You're asking too much. You pay Jaren, you pay Clarke, make them be the ones that are overextended if anyone's going to be overextended. Trust that front court and let them make mistakes. Because even if Memphis loses against Denver, at least it's a learning experience. At least they find a way to work through those things as opposed to being protected from failure. You leaned into X. You didn't play Brandon. Where did that get you? You lost still. So if you play Brandon, who's a better physical player than Xavier Tillman, and you play Jaren at the 5, and you still lose because somebody fouled out, at least you're letting your better players gain valuable experience. And that is what I want to see going into Denver. Obviously, I want Ja Morant to score better. Obviously, I hope Luke Kennard can play and provide some spacing. Those are clear-cut needs. But the Grizzlies beat the Sixers in rebounding, 49-43, and they still lost the game. Find a way to get your best players on the floor more consistently together. More Ja Morant, Desmond Bane, Dylan Brooks, Jaren Jackson Jr., Brandon Clark minutes. Those are your best five with Steven Adams out. That's your best five in terms of a defensive front court, offensive backcourt, the ability to switch, pick and roll, screen. Your versatility is stronger in that way. Let those guys cook. Let them play. That is what I hope to see against the Nuggets, because the Nuggets are going to bring it. They're a good basketball team. You need to be able to play your best players. And if you can't play them because you think they have some hindrance against them, then are they really your best players? At some point, you got to ask that question, and it's coaching or the player, one or the other. Thank you for making Locked On Grizzlies your first listen today. Now make your second listen Game to Game NBA. Every moment, every top performance, every result. Locked On Game to Game covers every game from across the NBA with local analysis that only Locked On can deliver. Follow Game to Game on Locked On NBA, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get podcasts. It's the weekend. That's exciting. And the Grizzlies, again, thankfully, have a game coming up against the Denver Nuggets. So a chance to get the taste of this fourth quarter collapse out of their mouth. On Monday's show, we will talk about that Denver Nuggets game, going a little bit deeper into numbers and how things looked compared to the Philly game. It's a home game for Memphis, so that's a big deal. This is a game that, again, Philly was a good measuring stick. The Grizzlies were able to compete, and then they fell apart at the end for a variety of reasons, a lot of which we talked about on this episode. Can they learn lessons from those mistakes and improve upon them? We'll talk about that on Monday's episode of Locked On Grizzlies. And hopefully DeMichael will be able to be back with us again. Understandable if he's not. It was wonderful to have him back on Thursday's show. Thank you to everybody for the kind words and comments down in the comments on YouTube. Much appreciated. I know DeMichael appreciated them as well. And thank you for joining us here on this episode of Locked On Grizzlies to help start your weekend the right way. Hopefully the Grizzlies will help the weekend continue in the right way against the Denver Nuggets. Like, comment, rate, review, subscribe, however you get your podcast. Locked On Grizzlies is there. You can also check us out over on YouTube. Thank you so much for making us a part of your Memphis Grizzlies and NBA experience. Until Monday, I am your host, Joe Mullinax. Have a wonderful weekend. Stay safe and stay locked in. Locked On Grizzlies will be waiting for you on Monday morning. Have a good